Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kim Parks. On this episode, we will be doing what I call the Sophie Diaries, where I take you along on my cross-country USA road trip in Sophie Girl, my 2011 Sprinter camper van conversion. And when we last spoke, and I'll be doing these episodes on the third Thursday of the month throughout the summer while I'm traveling, and the first Thursday of the month will be an adventure where I'm probably interviewing somebody unless I did like a special adventure on my own. So the first Thursday of the month will be a main adventure, and the second Thursday of the month will be the Sophie Diaries. So if you're interested in keeping up with what's going on and what it's like traveling during this crazy time and just getting an idea of what this beautiful country's got going for it. So without further ado, let's get started with the Sophie Diaries. When we last spoke, I was heading to Roanoke to an Airbnb, so I'm going to pick up from that point. Last year, I had inadvertently timed my visit to Sturgis, South Dakota at the same time that 500,000 bikers were there to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the namesake motorcycle rally, and this was during a pandemic. Today, I happened to visit Kentucky for the first time, unfortunately coinciding with the season's first violent weather. I'm in a gorgeous campsite at the land between the lakes, and this is where Western Kentucky and Tennessee meet. Sometime between 4 and 8 p.m. To expect some seriously heavy winds, hail, a strong possibility of tornadoes. They're calling it a Category 4 out of 5 storm, and I am warned to be prepared. I'm like, okay, great. I mean, all I got is a van, but they do have a cinder block bathhouse. So I'm going to use that as my backup shelter should I need to. Sophie, my Sprinter camper van, is compact, and my plan is to move us up to the bathhouse when the bad weather hits. That way, if I hear that telltale sign that sounds like a freight train coming, hopefully I can dart into the cinder block bathroom and be safe. And if I'm really scared, I might even wear my bike helmet. It'd be the second time in a week that my bike helmet may have saved the day. But before I talk about Kentucky, let's get back to the beginning of where we left off the last time, in Roanoke. After a couple of days exploring Roanoke, Virginia, I headed across the mountains and discovered a charming small Virginia town called Abingdon. It's near Bristol. The main drag actually has one state on one side of the street and the other state on the opposite. It must be crazy, especially with different COVID rules. They have a different sales tax and everything else. Isn't that ridiculous? It's crazy. But Bristol is a bit touristy for my taste, so I preferred Abingdon. I'm enchanted with the attractive downtown. It boasts at least a half a dozen quality local restaurants, not just Tom's Pizza, Subway, and such. I meet Miss Marie at the art co-op, and she tells me all about the vibrant art community and the art scene there, and I'm finding the locals super friendly. I need to get some work done, but the library is closed to the public. Miss Debbie there, the librarian, was kind enough to let me charge up my laptop out front on a bench. And that's where I met Randy, a retired history teacher. I'll bet we chatted for at least an hour. I learned from him that this library was a true seed saver library. They're trying to help keep these heirloom seed varieties in circulation. You can check out these tasty varieties for free, and hopefully you return the favor by donating some of the seeds from your own crop. So much of the produce that we buy in grocery stores are hybrids, which can't be reproduced by seed. Hybrid varieties have also been bred to ship well and last a long time and look pretty, but sadly, most of the taste has been bred out of them to get those qualities. So our only hope for a decent tomato, etc., is with heirloom varieties, which, although are often more disease and insect susceptible and sometimes look a little funny, boy do they taste good. Randy also tells me about the local cemetery, which I would have surely missed, and I make a point to visit the next morning when it opens. Buried there are folks from as far back as the Revolutionary War, as well as a large grave for a massive Confederate casualty when 2 trains collided full of troops. He also explained how that old insurance company, Woodmen of the World, used to base the height of the tombstone they provided to the insured, whoever died, based on how long they lived. So an old man gets a tall tombstone, but the child gets a short one, so that's why in this cemetery you see all this varying height to the tombstones. There's an awful lot of history made in this little town, and they do a great job with interpretive signs throughout the town. Virginia State Theater, the Barter Theater, is also based in Abingdon. During the Depression, in an effort to keep the actors fed, they bartered food for performances, something local farmers and homesteaders readily approved of. The Barter Theater is still going strong and now boasts 2 large buildings. It's also in this little town of Abingdon that I'm also fine-tuning my stealth sleeping strategy. Let me explain. I don't mind spending good money for a hotel when I want something nice, but when you think about it, I'm pretty self-sustaining as Sophie. I've got 2 solar panels, I have power, overhead lights, and an outlet. I've got 12 gallons of fresh water, and that makes me good for days. I have a 2-burner stove, a bar sink, and a chest refrigerator that provides all my kitchen needs. I have a super comfortable full-size foam mattress that's better than many hotel beds. I use a 5-gallon bucket as a toilet whenever I need to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or in an emergency situation. So I basically have a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom, and a tolerable living room if I use my fold-up chair and table even inside, although I normally try to set those outside unless the weather's bad. The only thing I don't have is a shower and reliable Wi-Fi. And while I have never used up all my solar battery juice, I do not tempt the gods, and whenever possible, I try to charge my thirsty electronics outside of the van. Last summer when I wasn't camping, I would go to a hotel or an Airbnb, but frankly that's getting expensive, especially when I stopped to think I was paying $70 to $120 a night, basically just for shower and Wi-Fi. Last summer I was out for 6 weeks, so yeah, I could absorb that a little bit more, but now I'm going to be out for 6 months. I've got to figure out a better way. I want to be able to figure out a way to get cleaner than my baby white bath can do, and also still get my podcast work done without breaking the bank. Because when my travel savings bucket runs out, my extended travel is over, so I want to stretch things out as much as I can. And I come up with a solution. Here's my new way of traveling. When I can be somewhere pretty that I actually want to hike or bike and explore, I will camp in Sophie or my tent at a campsite, whether at a park or boondocking. And if you don't know what boondocking is, or that's free camping, you can check out my companion podcast, Adventure Travel Show podcast. I did an exclusive episode just on boondocking. I'll put a link in the show notes. But if I'm just passing through or I'm just zoning trying to get to someplace, I don't really care where I sleep. So now I'm stealth camping. And by that, I mean I'm sleeping in Sophie, but in a non-traditional manner. I'm going to park in a parking place that doesn't have any signs posted saying no overnight parking, etc. No time constraints like 2-hour parking, or you have to be here, you can only park between these hours. I'm looking for a place that has no restrictions on the parking out in the street. This completely eliminates my hotel bills, unless I want to. But what about the shower and the Wi-Fi? So to solve this, I joined Planet Fitness on their upgraded plan. That allows me access to like 2,000 locations in the U.S., although I'm concentrating in the East, but there's enough in the West Coast that that's going to work for me too. Now I can shower, plus they even have Wi-Fi, even though the settings isn't very conducive for work. And I noticed when I was at one the other day, they didn't even have outlets to plug into, so they're not encouraging that. However, in a pinch, I could go at least download podcasts or download things and get things done if I had to. Many are open 24 hours, and so even in a real pinch, I could probably even park in the parking lot. I prefer to be a little less obvious that I'm sleeping in the van, so I don't like to park in parking lots. I'd prefer a residential area. I'm trying to find a safe-looking, nice neighborhood, not too fancy, but not rough-looking. For a middle class and even a lower middle class that's tidy is the best. I even like when there's a lot of rentals around too, because the tenants tend not to care at all. I'm figuring hopefully I'm not going to stick out that much. And I'm guessing it's going to be a little bit safer than, say, a Walmart, a Cracker Barrel, Bass Pro Shop. These are parking lots that many of which they allow you to sleep overnight for a night or two. The first time I tried to do this stealth camping, I was in the small town of Virginia. There's a Cracker Barrel right off the interstate that I could have stayed in, but I worried I might be the only one. I didn't like that the interstate was right there. If the boogeyman came for me, he would be able to skedaddle on that interstate and nobody would ever find him. So I decided to head into town instead, and I parked catty corner away from the police station in front of a surprisingly active after-hours plumbing business. I was nestled under trees on a quiet side street, and no one bothered me at all. The next time I did, I was in Abingdon, that cute little town I mentioned earlier. There was a law office across from the library, so I thought that would be ideal. I told the librarian Debbie what I was going to do, and she thought it'd be fine. But I noticed that the house on the other side of the law office kept coming over to kind of check on the dogs and check on the trash and find other reasons to be around. And so I thought maybe I was making her nervous having an unusual van parked kind of near her house. So the next time I saw her talking to yet another neighbor, I stepped out of my van to introduce myself and explain what I was doing and that I wasn't a threat to anybody. Not only were they relieved, they said they'd call the other neighbors, and we ended up chatting for about 30 minutes. There are some super friendly and kind people in Abingdon. And last night, I was having difficulty finding a suitable place to stealth park Sophie because there wasn't a lot of street parking in the residential neighborhoods I'd be comfortable staying in. And the town had just a few city parks, and the one nearby closed at 5, so that wasn't going to work. I've been driving a lot, so I wanted to chill out in the fresh air before it got dark. So I came up with a new plan. I found an apartment building, figuring young people would be less threatened by the van than a homeowner, and less likely to call the cops to check out the situation. Not that I'm not doing anything illegal, at least I don't think so. And I found the perfect spot. Not only did this little cluster of apartment buildings I found nicely tucked in the woods have a huge visitor parking area in the back, it had a great shady place I could take out my chair and read until it got dark. I did see a few people out walking their dogs. I smiled and I waved, and nobody paid me a bit of mind. This crazy, odd, very friendly, unthreatening lady reading a book under the trees somewhere near the back dumpsters. I picked this town to get my first COVID immunization shot because I'm having problems because I'm traveling, getting things lined up. I'd made a reservation to get my first COVID immunization shot in this Tennessee town, and I'm going to have to figure out someplace in Arizona it looks like to get my shot number 2, but I'm going to worry about that later. So going back to stealth camping, this new way of stealth sleeping on a travel day is going to save me a fortune. I'll probably still book an Airbnb with a washer and dryer every couple of weeks to avoid the laundromat, but when I pay for a hotel, it's going to be because I want something special, not just simply as a place to rest my head for a shower and Wi-Fi. For example, in Henderson, North Carolina, where my dear friend Mickey and I spent 2 nights last weekend, we stayed in a lovely suite in the Waverly Inn. I loved having a sunroom to chill out in. The beds and the linens were luxury, the breakfast exquisite. They even had a social hour where we met Jerry and Ann, fellow hikers that we ended up going out to dinner with, and I hope that we'll keep up with in the future. They also gave us some good tips on where to hike in the area, and we thoroughly enjoyed their company. After spending a week poking around the Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee mountain towns in search of my future retirement hometown, it's time to start heading west. My affiliate, Wildland Trekking, offered me the chance to go on their Red Rock base camp hiking adventure in Sedona. They had an open spot for the 7th of April, so if I wanted to get there, I was going to have to book it. But my next stop was the Land Between the Lakes, a place that my hiking buddy and dear friend Jane you've often heard me talk about said was so pretty. These super long twin lakes are in the northwest border of both Kentucky and Tennessee, thus the name. To book in advance, you have to do so at least 2 days prior, and I wasn't 100% sure when I would arrive, so I decided once again to take my chances at the gate. I stopped in the visitor center of the nearby town of Cadiz for some information, and I told the helpful woman that this might be my only weekend here, so what would be my preferred campsite areas? This recreation area encompasses a gazillion acres and takes about more than an hour to drive north to south. It might even be 2 hours. She suggested I try the Energy Lake campground because it was small and private, unlike the others. At LBL, as they call the Land Between the Lakes, you can get a full hookup site, cabins, basic or primitive sites, or even dispersed boondocking sites. You still need to get a paid permit for the latter, and of course also pay for the campground sites. At LBL, there are over 200 miles of hiking trails, a north to south mountain biking trail, plus I pass a super long paved bike path off the road on the road to the entrance, and of course all the water activities from kayaking, canoeing to fishing and boating. The landscape is filled with mixed hardwood rolling hills and these 2 long Finger Lakes. It is a beautiful area, and I'm so glad that Jane told me about it. I startled a bald eagle on my very first hike at LBL when the trail was once again approaching the lake. The guy was resting up in a tree, and I'm not sure I've ever been this close to one in the wild. I never can get over how huge they are. A brochure tells me that we now have over 10,000 nesting bald eagle pairs in the U.S., and in 2007 they were actually removed from the endangered species list. What a great conservation story. I also saw lots of great blue herons and again a pileated woodpecker. I believe I've seen one of these woody woodpecker birds on every hike I've been on this spring. According to the Woodland Nature Station, you might also come across signs of one of the 400 coyotes that roam the area, as well as the many bobcats and introduced red wolves, but you're unlikely to see any of these shy mammals. Apparently, they also have a problem with feral pigs that can cause a mess with native vegetation, and you're supposed to report any sightings. The Interpretive Center gives you a great lowdown on all the native animals. Also, be sure to check out the Bison and Elk Prairie. Located not too far from the main Central Visitor Center, you can see roaming herds. They've done a remarkable job reinstating native prairie lands for them to feed. I've only booked 3 nights here, and I feel like had I not had to hurry to Sedona, I could easily spend a week. It's so vast, and there's so much to see and do. They even have a planetarium. Tomorrow, provided I don't play Dorothy in a tornado tonight, I plan to bike that long paved trail so I can get some distance bike training in preparation for my fall Croatia trip. Oh, and that reminds me to tell you about the incident. Last Saturday in Abingdon, that town that I like so much, I wanted to bike the Virginia Creeper Trail. This is one of the Hall of Famer rails to trails where the converted railroad bed become biking and hiking trails. I'd biked a section a few years back and I wanted to bike more of it. The trail is super steep when you're in Damascus, Virginia, where I was heading. So on this first trip, I hired an outfitter to take me to the top of the mountain, and you simply just glide down. It's super fun. Today, I'm going to bike from the start in Abington and head towards Damascus, about 17 miles away. This is a truly lovely trail. You spend most of the time under the canopy of the trees, often along a river. Sometimes you cross farms, but most you're out in nature in a mixed hardwood forest. And on these rails to trails, for the most part, the grade is simple, and it's usually less than 5%. So they're not too hard. So it's basically a pleasant bike ride. And a fun thing you can do if you don't want to bike the 35 miles to go up and back is to make a 2-day trip of it. You can pick Abington or Damascus as your start point, bike to the other town, have lunch, explore the destination town, and then spend the night and return the next day. They even have an overnight parking lot for just this purpose. And Damascus, Virginia is a huge Appalachian trail town and where they host the annual trail days that draws through hiker alumni from around the country, if not the world. It's a cute town and worthy of at least a day to explore. So on this particular bike ride, while riding through a farm, there was a boggy area made by the farmers' tire ruts. And all the dew and all that was melting. And so I was like, no sense getting muddy. And now this is when you cue the noise of doom. I get the great idea of, instead of going through the big mud puddle, that I'm going to go up in the little grassy median between the tires. And it's only about 3-inch higher, but unfortunately my hybrid bike tire is more like a street bike tire, and it didn't have enough grip. And so I totally spun out. That front wheel flipped on me. And as I fell, my whole body weight fell and pinned handlebar to my left shoulder. And it hurt. It hurt. Shaken, I kind of picked myself up. I assessed the damage. No blood. It hurt like heck, but nothing appeared to be broken. And I figured my shoulder was going to swell and hurt worse. So even though I was only a couple miles from Damascus, I decided it'd probably be prudent to head back just in case I did have some swelling issues. Because like I said, I was in a lot of pain. And I'll do the whole ride again someday. It's not going anywhere. And that first week, just getting dressed would take my breath away. It's the raising my arm that kills me. As long as I'm just sitting normally, it seems to be okay. But moving that arm above the shoulder ain't going to happen anytime soon. And I'm glad, though, at least I just hit the top of my shoulder and not any joints. So I just think I just got a serious bruise. And I make a memo to myself. Always wear a bike helmet, even if I don't think it's necessary. I was even contemplating not wearing one on this particular ride because it's just such a gentle drive. But you see what happened. I did actually hit my head. Didn't bang it hard. But the helmet saved yet one more boo-boo besides my shoulder. I even met a gal once. She wears a helmet even on a horse because she fell off once and she has permanent brain damage from it. And I never forgot that. So I tend to err on the side of caution whenever I have to make these kinds of judgment calls. The wind, she howled that night. But by the time I'm writing this now, it's been 3 days since that storm passed through. And I made it out fine, but I still have no cell service in the land between the lakes. So I have no idea if other areas fared all right as well. There was one moment that the wind got particularly strong, and I did move Sophie up by the boathouse just in case I needed to seek shelter. But I ended up going back to my campsite around 30 minutes later when it seemed that the main storm cell had passed. It was supposed to be all over by 8 p.m., so gratefully I didn't need to worry about a tornado coming through during the night. So not only do I not know if everyone made it through the storm okay, I couldn't tell you anything that's going on in the world or with my loved ones. There is a bit of peace in that, but I'll also be anxious to make a connection and check in with the world on Sunday night or Monday. I've been thinking about these next couple of weeks. I really wish that my Sedona trip was the following week, but this is the last open spot they had until the fall. Remember, I told you, the tour operators tell me travel has certainly picked up, especially domestic travel. I'm still a long way away, and my plan was to visit Big Bend and Carlsbad en route to Arizona and Colorado. I also wanted to stop by to say hi to Judy and Arliss while I was in Texas, but looking at the distances and my calendar deadline, I'd be doing a lot of driving, but allowing very little time to visit and explore. So I've decided to postpone Texas and Carlsbad until my next road trip, when I want to go out and visit the West Coast National Parks. This is going to give me some breathing room, and I will take that extra time to explore some of New Mexico. This is also going to give me some time to take a vacation from my vacation, something I find necessary to do about every 2 weeks out. You need to take care of your life's business, from doing laundry and cleaning out Sophie, from paying bills to cleaning up emails and stuff. I also need to finish production on the next podcast episode. So having a little bit of breathing space is going to be nice. My time at Land Between the Lakes has been wonderful. The area is huge. I would recommend, if you decide to come here for more than a few days and don't have a huge camping setup, that you actually move campsites. Like I said, it's about an hour drive from where I am to get to the north end or to the south end. And I'm at Energy Lake Campground, which is in the middle. And I really would recommend staying there. But if you want to do more exploration of the north and south parts of this recreation area, it might be a good idea to move for a couple of days to each of those sections so you're not spending so much time in the car. I've done all the central trails here, which they go around near some of the smaller lakes. They're all lovely, although the hiker trail was pretty boggy from the storm. This area attracts folks who like to fish naturally, and many are amazed that I'm doing all this hiking. It works for me. I get the trails pretty much to myself, and there's more than 200 miles of trails here. A backpacker can even hike the whole north to south trail. Today, I had planned to bike several hours along the super long paved road I saw before entering the recreation area. And it's been a week as I write this since my bike fall, and I've decided on second thought, I think I need to get a little bit more time to heal. I had a massive bruise, I bet you it was like 16 inches by 5 inches, running from my shoulder all the way down my chest, and it's now turned that sickly looking yellowy, brownish, iodine-y color, so it's definitely healing, but the shoulder's still in a lot of pain. I've gotten the bulk of my range of motion back, but I still don't like raising my arm above my shirt. So I hate washing my hair. I hate putting on a pullover shirt. And sleeping is not the most comfortable, but it's getting better. So I'm just going to hike for now and worry about it later. One thing I liked about this campsite I have is a huge flock of red-winged blackbirds spend the night here. So in the morning they serenade me, and at night they serenade me. And that's been a lot of fun. I've actually enjoyed having my phone turned back into a watch instead of my internet and personal assistant and all that. So it's basically my watch and my step counter. How many steps did I do each day? And that's pretty good. I am running into one problem on this trip. I'm not stretching. Normally I stretch every morning when I was at home, but I haven't worked that into my routine now that I'm in Sophie. So my body is getting really tight from, I'm sitting a lot in the van right now I'm doing so much driving instead of touring, basically. I'm really, really behind the wheel a lot. And I've got to solve this problem. It feels a little weird to just set up a mat out in the campground, but I think I'm going to have to end up doing that. But I haven't done it yet, but I know that I need to because I'm feeling it in my body. Another issue I got to work on. For the most part, I can eat the same stuff over and over and over again and not get sick. But yesterday, I think I about had it with my chicken wrap lunches. And I just couldn't eat another salad with some chicken stuck on top of it. And I rummaged through my quote-unquote pantry, and I found some of that Knorr's Alfredo pasta stuff. So I made some of that and put a can of tuna in that. And at least it was something different. And I was like, oh, but it called for milk. I was like, I don't have any milk. But knowing me, I got backpacker stuff, so I dug in there and I found some powdered milk, and so that solved that. But it wasn't that good. I'm going to have to come up with some variety. I don't think I could eat the same thing for 6 months. I could do it for 6 weeks, but I'm going to have to figure out something on that. So that's, if you got any good ideas on that, things that are easy to fix. I really don't like cooking a lot in here for some reason. I've got the stuff, I just don't like to do it. You just don't have a lot of room to move, even though it's there. Maybe if I cooked outside, maybe that would be the difference. I don't know, but this is going to be a problem I need to work on. When I'm leaving Land Between the Lakes, I did get a special treat heading out of the park. I saw another bald eagle, but this one flew right in front of my van with its catch, which looked to be a rabbit. At least he'd killed it, so it wasn't suffering. But it was really interesting to see the eagle taking its catch back to the nest, probably for its chicks, because it's that time of year. I don't want to drive too far today. I'm just going to kind of chill, and I see a modest town up ahead that has a population of about 15,000. I'm thinking this is going to be a perfect place for another night of stealth camping and selfie in a town. But when I get there, the town looks like either COVID or maybe the Great Recession or something beat it down. It seemed like almost all the small businesses were out of business, so I knew I'd stand out too much, and I was uncomfortable staying there. It wasn't too far away that the Village Creek State Park, I stayed there last year, maybe like 15 miles away, so I decided to go there instead. I didn't need to use any of the facilities because I already geared up to be self-sufficient, but to me it was worth the $25 to feel safe and at least be able to sit outside of my chair for a couple hours before it got too cold. I also realized that now that I'm comfortable sleeping in Sophie in a town situation, I have abandoned my overseas rule that I had recently adopted of knowing where I was going to sleep by noon and getting there before dark. Now I just want to find a place to wind down and figure out where I'm going to sleep somewhere around 4 o'clock. That's going to be a big difference in how I travel now. So that's kind of cool. I'm excited about that. I'm reminded once again that the U.S. is a huge country. I have to be in Sedona by April 6th, and then I'm going to meet Jenny from the Flagstaff episode before, ironically, she heads to North Carolina for several weeks. So I want to see her before my Sedona tour. That means I'm really booking it versus my normal sluggish pace. For the last 3 days, I've been mostly driving or working and haven't really been training for my hike, and I hope that I'm not going to regret that when I get on that trip. I'm also sad that I missed out on what would have been some definite detours I'd like to check out. After all, who wouldn't want to visit Toad Suck Park? I mean, I've heard about hallucinogenic toads in South America, but in Oklahoma? I'm going to have to research and figure out how it got that name. Speaking of Oklahoma, they had an interesting sign up that made me chuckle. It read, "Hitchhikers might be escaped prisoners." That is a very effective strategy, whether or not it's true. There were not going to be many people picking up hitchhikers. Another funny sign I read was when I crossed into Texas. There was a welcome sign followed by another stating that the welcome center and tourist information was just 100 miles ahead. Right? Did I mention that I was in a super remote part of the country? I'm back to topping off my gas tank when it gets down about a quarter of a tank, so I don't have to sweat like I did last summer in Nebraska, worrying about finding a gas station. And along the way, I come across a tremendous windmill farm. The last time I spent this much time in Texas, I saw some farmer had those dipping oil rigs that go up and down pumping the oil. In fact, one clever rigger had decorated each well as a painted critter. So instead of ugly bobbing oil rigs, you saw a bobbing caterpillar, a bobbing giraffe, a bobbing grasshopper, etc. It was worth a detour just to see it, although I can't remember what town it was when I was in Texas that I did. And when I look at all the windmills, I'm a little concerned because Texas is a migratory bird flyaway zone. And I know, and I'm hoping that they kept that in mind when they placed these windmills. I actually know a guy, his job is to count how many dead birds are under the windmills because millions of songbirds are killed by these windmills each year. So it's a catch-22. It's a sad understory about this method of energy production that you hardly read about. But I'm guessing that with all the clever minds in this country and the world, we're going to figure out a way to harness the wind and protect our birds too. Speaking of wind, these last couple of days have been super windy. I actually think my biceps are getting a workout holding on so tightly to the steering wheel. Sophie's pretty good, but with these open plains in windy March, Sophie has met her match. Trucks and trailers also are swerving as well. one poor car with a kayak tied down on top flew off onto the interstate, and there's a cluster of us going at least 75 miles an hour. It landed like a plus sign on the center line of the two lanes in the direction we were going. There was a pedestrian to the right. It's a miracle that nobody got hurt. Everybody was able to swerve around it, and I consider that was a day that it was not our day to die, because that was a little bit sketchy, because you only have a second to react as you see this flying object coming at you. It was about 2 cars ahead of me. Again, going that fast. So I consider ourselves very, very lucky. It'll definitely get your adrenaline pumping. Last night, I stayed in another recreation area just off the interstate, and at least it was shady and was by a large river. Best of all, I had internet service, so I was able to finish off the Grand Canyon episode. And if I weren't in such a rush to get out west, I'd have stayed a few days just to get ahead in the podcast a bit more. It is so rare for me to have cell service in any of the campgrounds I've been in. But I still have 1 more week to go. But I believe I'm close enough now that I can start getting in and hike each day. I made it to Amarillo. This morning, I wanted to head out early, and I was like, God, it seems awfully dark. It was still dark out. I was like, I'm not seeming to get any light. And sure enough, Sophie's headlights, I knew one was out because Nikki had told me, but now the other one's gone out. So I had to wait till it got light enough to drive. And fortunately, there was a auto parts store right before the interstate that opened right as I pulled in the parking lot at 7:30 in the morning. So I was like, all right, this is meant to be. We're going to get Sophie fixed up. And I was so thrilled. Get everything fixed. That's actually the first thing that's broken since I've been in Sophie. Was the headlamp light bulb. So that's not a big deal. I'm excited to hit New Mexico. The last time I was there was about 4 decades ago. I worked in sales for Black & Decker, and El Paso was part of my territory. I flew there each month, but one visit, for whatever reason, I had 2 clients there. I could see one on a Friday, the other one couldn't see me that Friday, so I had to see them on Monday. And so I had the whole weekend, and I'd been in El Paso since I went there every month. I knew El Paso pretty well. So I saw this billboard said, come to Rio Doso. So I said, okay, I got nothing else to do. So I had no idea. So I got so surprised when this flat desert started creeping up the mountains, and then I emerged in this gorgeous sanctuary. And I stayed at a place, I hope it's still around, called the Inn of the Mountain Gods. It was gorgeous. And I looked back because the area was so pretty, and I was like, real estate. I looked to see what land cost. I had enough money in my pocket. It was like $100 an acre back then. I bet you couldn't pick that up for that now. Sophie's windows are huge, and that blazing sun comes in all day. Being blonde and fair, I don't like all that sun on my skin. So I have a new thing I do. I have these cotton gloves. They're almost like the church gloves I wore as a kid. Instead of constantly applying sunscreen, which can be a little bit dangerous at 75 miles an hour, I wear these gloves, and I love it. And except for my face and my body, I'm feeling like I'm looking like Sophie Loren. My gloved hands are rocking it. Tonight, and actually as I'm writing this, I'm trying something new, and something I didn't think I'd ever do. Everything out here is just flat pasture land, and there's no place to stealth camp. I was going to head to a state park, but then I realized it's 20 miles off the interstate, so that means I'm going to add an extra 40 miles just so I could drive into a campground. I was like, no way, not with all the heavy driving I've been doing lately. Right now, my mission is to hightail it to New Mexico. And I kept seeing all these billboards for a Valero travel stop just before Amarillo. It's called Toot and Totem. I decided I'm going to check it out, and it actually looks pretty nice. After I topped off the tank, I asked the female clerks just to make sure, A, if I could park overnight, and B, was it safe for a single gal, and they said no problem. These places count on you buying gas, possibly a shower, food, snacks, etc. And I'm going to make sure I eat dinner there, so it's a win-win for them. I parked by the side door, which is probably a little closer to the store than they'd prefer, but no one is here, and I feel more comfortable here. This turns out to be a great idea. So if you're ever traveling on I-40 near Amarillo, I think it was exit 375. Great place to crash if you're just on a drone mode trying to get to one place to another. And I did figure out a solution with my salad dinners as well. The problem was I like to doctor my salads with seeds and oat bran sesame sticks and all these good crunchy things, but I'd been having problems finding them. So now it's just down to the boring spinach, tomato, carrots, and just repetition of that. But with all the nice little treats that I found again, my salads aren't boring to me anymore. So at least for now, I can handle my repetitive salads. I'm starting to see coyotes now. I know they've made it to where I lived in North Carolina, even though I never saw one there. But I'm seeing one. At first I'll think it's a dog. I was like, oh, that's a coyote. Because I believe they're becoming quite prolific. As I head into New Mexico, there's 3 places I really want to see. I want to see Albuquerque, Taos, and Santa Fe. And while I hope to get some hiking in, I mainly want to see them culturally. The original plan was to go to Albuquerque and then see the other 2, but looking at the map, I realized I'd have to do some backtracking. Anyway, so I decided to go to Santa Fe first. The one good thing about traveling shortly after the New Mexico governor started opening things up is that I had the whole historic Central Plaza almost to myself. This is one of the bright sides of COVID. The sad side is I don't think a lot of the small businesses made it. I literally have a picture of me it was probably 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, not even a handful of people down at the plaza. The other sad side, and this is not due to COVID, but the huge middle class that now travels from the US, China, Europe, and beyond, everything has gotten so touristy. I doubt any locals can afford to shop in this plaza. They have been pushed out of here as well as every cute place I've visited for the last decade or more. Not being a shopper, I can usually do the touristy areas in an hour or 2. I like going to the galleries, but I don't like to do the shopping. So I'm a easy in and out of seeing the pretty architecture. I also like Airbnb experiences to get more of a local feel, but on this trip so far, I haven't had the time to do any of those. And speaking of which, I'm getting mad at Airbnb. They have really been jacking up the fees, and the Airbnb lodge owners have been toying with their nightly charges, and then they inflict some really nasty cleaning charge, and they've gotten so high now that it's not uncommon for the total charge to be double what the quoted price is that when you're looking at the map of all the different options. And it makes me mad because they know how many days that you're staying, and they should amortize the different fees, both their hefty Airbnb fee and the cleaning fees into that, so you're comparing apples to apples. It's very frustrating. I'm finding myself using that app less and less these days, and I'm finding it simpler just to stay in a hotel. And now that I'm stealth camping in Sophie, I'm not even staying in the hotels that much. As I'm leaving Santa Fe and getting to the countryside, I see a sign warning about cattle roaming in the area, and somebody has very neatly painted a matching black UFO flying saucer hovering over the cow's head. It gave me my day's chuckle because that's so New Mexico, isn't it? I'm in the high desert now. The flat plains that became the mesas of western Texas are now a brownish, tanny red, undulating irregular hills. In the background, you see snow-covered peaks. In fact, in some places, you still see some remaining snow on the northern sides of the hills. It's still getting down to freezing at night, but once the sun rises overhead, it heats up quickly. That's one great thing about deserts. They lose their heat so quickly at night and are often chilly or downright cold. In places, you really get to see the striations of various ages of the soil. The harder soil is holding firm while the softer erodes away into some really interesting shapes. That's what I love about all the western deserts, all the cool, otherworldly landscapes. But here it's mostly a lot of dots of vegetation. At first it's tumbleweed, and then I think it's sagebrush. As I head up an elevation, remember Santa Fe is over 7,000 feet above sea level, there are a lot of cedar and pine. The hills are dotted with these dark green blobs against the brown hills. It's very striking. I take the direct route to Santa Fe and return south via the scenic high pass. Frankly, both ways are stunning, and it's a most pleasant drive. I do pull over a lot because I want to drive slowly to savor it, and I don't want to annoy the people behind me that are just trying to get to work. And frankly, I'm noticing that most of the towns I drive through outside of the big tourist ones are not very prosperous. Although driving through the reservation in Nambi, if I'm saying that right, is an exception. The adobe homes are in great shape with fully intact roofs, not like some of the crumbling villages I've also gone through. The closer I get back to Santa Fe, of course, the nicer the structures, and that's to be expected. The artsy and ski town of Taos is nice, but again, very touristy, so I don't stay long. I want to take a hike that the hotel manager recommends, but I can't find the trailhead. I wanted to hike down to the Rio Grande, which is way up here, although much skinnier than down in Texas. It's the only sight of serious water I've seen in New Mexico. The canyon down there would be beautiful, I know, and I'm sad I can't find it. I do, however, find the restaurant he steers me to. I had planned on getting Mexican, but he says, no, I want to get a hamburger. I said, all right, I always trust the locals. And I'm delighted that I took his advice because I got the best burger of my life at the 5-star burger joint. Gorgonzola, some chopped up smoked bacon on a high quality beef patty with all the regular fixins, and then they also put on some green chili mayonnaise. I didn't think I was that hungry, but I ate the whole thing. I ended up having to stay at a hotel in Sophie in Taos because I got foiled by the governor's COVID rules. I had first gone to a Planet Fitness in Santa Fe to shower before I explored the towns, only to be told that the gyms are now open. They aren't allowed to open the showers yet. I could do another baby white bath, but I seriously need a proper shower, and thus the Quality Inn. One thing I like to do when I travel is to contrast how locals do things versus what I'm used to. And I have this peculiar interest in checking out how various cultures honor their dead, so I often visit cemeteries. I find the assorted practices fascinating. Here in New Mexico, I don't even need to go to a cemetery, although I later do. Because of the heavy Mexican-American population here, the custom of elaborate honoring of the dead is showcased in full measure. You see this at most roadside crosses. Unlike most of the country where you see a cross and perhaps a wreath or a bunch of soaked flowers, here the crosses are exuberantly decorated in a riot of bright colors. They'll be covered in bright silk leis and shiny colorful bead necklaces and all sorts of just color or riots of color. There'll be bunches of soaked flowers, often a circular white rock outline of a tomb, although I'm pretty sure that's symbolic. There might be many statues or tokens of affection left behind. By one cross, there was a full-size plastic Christmas tree. Sadly, there are a lot of these decorated crosses along the highway. Whether the crashes are from high speeds, reckless or drunk driving, or icy roads, I'm not sure. But I did notice the same thing when I was out in Montana and Wyoming last year, but those without these colorful decorations. If you are curious about the Mexican tradition of honoring the dead, I encourage you to listen to the episode I did on Baja and the Day of the Dead ceremony in Mexico. Visiting Mexico this important date for Hispanics is a bucket list item for me. They celebrate and embrace their loved ones that have passed in a way that I find compelling. Another thing I like about traveling is seeing how they use their local resources to solve problems. For example, out here you see a lot of adobe buildings. There aren't many trees at lower elevations, but they have a lot of dirt or clay. Traditionally, they would make mud bricks and then stucco the homes with yet more clay. I love how they look here, and it matches the landscape, even though it would look completely out of place on the East Coast. They also use a lot of, I'm guessing, the young cedars. They're taking sticks maybe 3 or 4 inches wide and just nailing them to rails, and they make really attractive fences. One thing New Mexico does have is a lot of BLM land. BLM stands in Bureau of Land Management, run by the U.S. Forestry Service and owned by the U.S. taxpayer. I think I read somewhere that the U.S. government owns about 80% of the land out west. Usually you can use this land for free. And again, I refer you to the Boondocking episode to get more information on how to do this. I see lots of boondockers on my return to Santa Fe on the high pass. The forest roads are well marked, most are dirt, so I'd also recommend on a lot of them that you get 4-wheel drive, although I did see some roughly paved roads as well. The Forestry Service generally has an office near whatever the population centers are near the forest, so you can go in and get advice and a map. Now, these maps are intimidating because the land masses are huge. I remember learning that when I was in Bighorn National Forest in Wyoming last summer. I also see that some national forests are now online. You can find on an online app called Avenza Maps. It's a free app with easier to read roads. So you can download the forest you want to explore and then tell it which section you want to go in, so the map is at a much easier scale to read. My plan this weekend is to check out Flagstaff and the National Forest. I'm also excited to meet in person Jenny from the Flagstaff episode. We've been going back and forth. We've talked on the phone, but it'll be nice to put a real face to the name. I'm excited about that. We're going to be going hiking Saturday. I asked her, please be gentle with the sea level gal until we see how I do. And hopefully I'm going to be able to hold my own. But regardless of my performance, I'm going to be delighted to finally meet Jenny. And since on our next episode, I actually will have gone on my Sedona trip, hiking tour, I will do a feature episode just on Sedona. So I look forward to telling you all about that. It's a gorgeous area if you've not seen it. It's just filled with magical red rocks and just exquisite landscape formations. I love the architecture in the whole area. There's a reason people call it one of the prettiest places on earth, and I can't wait to share that with you. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to the Sophie Diaries. I would appreciate feedback on that. Do you find this interesting or not? Or would you rather have the regular episodes? The letters I have gotten said that you do want to hear what it's like on the road trip. So that's what I'm doing unless I hear otherwise. So remember, this is your podcast. So please reach out to me at any time at kit@activetraveladventures.com. I will get back to you as soon as I'm on the grid. I am often off the grid several days each week now, but I love getting your emails and I love hearing from you and hearing what you're up to. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on.